At this point, you might be asking yourself why I keep putting this in front of you. Well, it's because I'm waiting for that student to lie on me or do whatever they're going to do to get themselves in trouble and then blame me for that. So make sure you remember, again, this is a contract you're signing if you watch these videos. Watch the video and listen to the words. Make sure you take notes so that I can help you. Again, if you bump into a problem, feel free to email me at any time. And it's best if you watch the video home before coming to class. Again, before class starts. So if let's say, for example, we have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. In college, R is Thursday, F is Friday. If I tell you that we are going to do section 3.1 on Monday, then try to watch 3.1 before you come to class on Monday. If I tell you we're going to do 3.2 on Tuesday, then make sure before you come to class on Tuesday that you watch 3.2. It doesn't mean you have to be done with 3.1. But as long as you're keeping up, it means you've at least watched the video on 3.1, and then you've watched the video on 3.2. And again, what that does is it gives you more time in class to answer questions and work on things that you need to finish. And then key thing is, again, if you allow yourself to fall behind by a series of sections, I don't know how I can help you. Just make sure you're ready to take the blame for what happens, because I can't help with that. I think I did say on the last part that solving is related to about 50% of your test. This is the second part of solving on 1.3, which is what we call literal equations. It's the part that people don't like, but again, the reason they don't like it is because they haven't practiced it enough, they haven't asked enough questions, and they just kind of want to rely on natural talent. But you're going to have to know your little equations, because there are some points on this. So another part of solving equations has more than one variable. They again are called literal equations. The trick to solving literal equations is by what I would say marking the important variable. How you do that is up to you. But here's the thing. If you know how to solve x plus 3 equals 8, then you know how to solve x plus y equals 6. What I would do is I would put a little dot above the x so I know what my actual variable is, and I would say I need to move my y. Well, how would I move a positive y? Well, the same way you move to 3, by subtracting y. What happens is you bring down your x, positive y and negative y go away. You just can't make this into one number, and so it ends up being 6 minus y, which is not so bad. But again, it's something that's different, it's uncomfortable, and so we don't like the way it looks, and so we feel scared to do it. That's where your practice comes in. But that's all you have to do. That's solved for x. We know how to do 5x equals 30. We divide by 5, we divide by 5, the 5's cancel out, 30 divided by 5 is 6. So therefore, we know how to get xy equals 15, because again, if x is the variable I want by itself, I have to get rid of y. They are attached through multiplication, so I will divide by y on both sides. Just like those things cancel, the y's cancel, x comes down. This is just an ugly answer. Just don't tell it it's ugly, it's rude. But 15 over y is where you end up. That's it. You just can't do anything with it. All right? Same thing. You know how to do x over 4 equals 6. We multiply by 4, we multiply by 4. These two things cancel out. X is 24. So therefore, we know how to do x over y equals 3. Because there's a y on the bottom, we multiply by y. These two y's cancel. X comes down, and this just ends up being 3y. But that's all there really is to it. Everything else is just going to be making it more difficult by giving you more numbers to deal with, more stuff to fight through. But the key part of this is remembering that the phrase solve for means get alone. So when you see solve for m, it means get m alone. That means everything else needs to go. When it says solve for t, it means get t alone. Everything else has to go. When you see solve for y, it means get y alone. Everything else has to go. And so that's where the marking comes in, because you don't know which one you're solving for until you see this phrase. So I'm solving this equation for n, which means what I'm going to do is put a little dot above n. It doesn't need to be big. It just needs to be something that visually you understand that this is what you want by itself. Let's just go ahead and make this the way it's supposed to be. 4m plus 3n equals, let's say, 5. Because there was nothing there, and I'm sure I messed up there. But anyway, 4m plus 3n equals 5. Write this down in your notes so you have it. But again, you're solving it for n. We're putting a dot there. Here's the thing. If this n is attached to 3 through multiplication, but this 4m is just hanging along, it would be the same as if I had this. Which means the way we would get rid of that 8 is by subtracting. Same thing over here. Subtract the full term of 4m, because 4m is not attached to n at all by any means outside of a plus sign, so we just make those go away. We bring down 3n, and this just turns into an ugly or not so attractive 5 minus 4m. After that, we divide everything by 3, and this is where your practice comes in. there's two different answers you can use, probably at least two. One is just going to be to leave it as 5 minus 4m over 3. The other is going to be to separate, as you learned in Algebra 1, to distribute this 3 to make it 5 over 3 minus 4m over 3. Either one of these two is good for me on a test. MathXL might mark you wrong for one, and then you try the other one and it works. But don't worry so much about the MathXL. You're using MathXL more for sparring and making sure that you've got the stuff down. If you miss it on MathXL and you come up and ask me, I will probably give you the answer anyway after I explain what's going on. So don't allow the MathXL to be your main judge. Just make sure you're trying to understand both of those things. Solve C times A plus B minus D equals F for A. Once again, we are solving for A, so this is my main variable. So just like if this was a number, again, if you ever get stuck, just write down everything else as a number. So let's say this is 2 times A, because that is a variable. 3 minus 4 equals 5. If you had this problem, the first thing you do is probably get rid of the 4, just like the first thing we're going to do is get rid of this variable. So if you ever get stuck, just change the other variables that aren't marked into a number, and then from there you can go. So either way, we end up with C times A plus B equals, and again, that's just not nice, F plus D. Well, if I had 2 times A plus 3 equals, and I'm just going to make this into a number. Again, I'm not going off of this, but I'm just visualizing what would I move. I would probably distribute the 2 maybe. So let's do that here. So C times A plus C times B equals F plus D. Well, this now starts to look like other questions, which is where your practice comes in. If A is my variable and that term is not attached to the A in anything at all, then I can move the other variable the same by subtracting CB. So CA equals F plus D minus CB. Last thing I will do, because A is my variable, is I am going to divide everything by C, which again gives me different options for answers, so you have to kind of be patient. There is F plus D minus CB all over C, which means leave it alone and simply leave it as one fraction, or split it, which gives us F over C plus D over C minus, but be careful here, CB over C, your two C's would cancel, which would be minus B. That is very important that if you shift over here that you simplify every fraction, which is why in terms of me, if I was a student taking a test that's on paper, I'm probably going to leave it like this, because that way I don't make a mistake here and lose half points, because again, I'm going to take half of your points on any slight error, just because we need to make sure we pay attention to detail. Not because I hate you, but because I want you to succeed and I know you can do it. But outside of that, there actually was another option we could have done. And let's see if it works. So I'm going to take this part here where we separated options and work it out a different way. So C times A plus B. And I want to see if it equals the same thing, because I'm kind of curious. Equals F plus D. Because there's other options. As you're getting better at your math, you start to get different options. This is C times A plus B, which means in all honesty, I could divide both sides by C here. It does end up the same. That's interesting. Which means we end up with the C's canceling out and just A plus B coming down with F plus D over C. Again, I'll just leave it alone because I don't want to make a stupid mistake. And then I'll subtract B from both sides, which again, follow me here. That's this fraction minus whatever I subtracted, which that doesn't look the same as this. But let's go ahead, and since we have terms, let's separate this out to be F over C, which is what that is, plus D over C minus B, which is exactly what you have here. Minus. Where did I get minus from? Plus, okay. But anyway, that's the general idea. The majority of this section is just making sure that you get to the point to where you're confident in your decisions. So again, that's why you want to use as much class time as possible for questions. If you make that a habit of watching your video before coming to class and not watching the video in class, then you actually maximize the amount of time that you can ask questions of me, of classmates, and you can kind of perfect your skill. You're going to mess up a lot. in order to learn things. That's every process that you learn. But you'd rather not waste the time that you have in class by having to watch a video that's been up all week. So just be careful on that. Anyway, you want to solve this for y. Once again, we want y by itself. So again, let's look at this. The piece that's not even close to y is this a. So what I'm going to do is add a to both sides. X plus y over z equals b plus a. If I want y by itself, the first thing I would probably do is get rid of this number here, this value here, by multiplying both sides by z. But again, I would multiply everything by z. The reason I only have one z here is because this is one term. So these two z's cancel out, giving me x plus y. This becomes zb, which would actually be, I'm sorry, alphabetize it, bz plus az. Alphabetizing is going to help you out because otherwise you miss some like terms. And then the last thing I'm going to do to get y by itself is subtract the x, which ends up being y equals all of this stuff minus x. All right. The one trick for this section, which is a trick that pops up in a lot of different things, but it pops up in a lot of different ways, is when you want to solve this for w. Our issue is that we have two w's, and how do you get w alone when there are two w's on the screen? So this trick is the only thing that really, once you get literal equations down, this is the only problem that people use to really throw you off, which is to give you multiple variables of the same type. Now it's important that you learn this because there are processes that use this, just not a lot, but when they pop up, if you don't at least kind of understand this process we're about to use, and it is going to give you some issues. The way that you deal with wx and wy and you want to get w alone is you make one w. How do we make one w? We use something called factoring. Factoring is the opposite of distributive property, which means both of these things have a w. So I'm going to factor a w off of both of these terms. And then once I do that, I now have w attached to x plus y, which means I don't want the x plus y. I can divide both sides by x plus y. These two things go away. W comes down. Z over x plus y is my answer. And you really can't separate that any further. Now, what they're typically going to do to you is they're going to give you something like this. And this is, you don't need to write this, but it'll help if you do. Z plus WA is they'll say solve this for W, and you have W's on two different sides. Well, what you'll have to do is take the first manipulative step, which is to move this term over there. And I know this wasn't written the right way because it was off the top of my head. But again, what you want to do when that variable you want by itself is on two different sides, just like you would if there were x's on both sides in a regular equation, is move them together. Then you factor off your W, and then you follow the steps that you would normally do from there. Keep in mind you have a quiz on Friday. Your quiz questions can be found in your homework. If you have not gotten your homework all the way to the point where you're about 90% done, chances are you're probably going to see some questions that you've never seen, and then you're going to possibly complain. And the first thing I'm going to say is the questions that you missed were questions you did not get to. Make sure you work to get your homework at least mostly done. And again, if you're not, make sure you're talking to me in class, emailing me it while you're at home. But you can do it. Just be careful and make sure you're in position to do well on it. Outside of that, I'll talk to you later, and good luck.